occasionally. I mean, I still want to know what he's doing, but I don't read it all the time like I used to. But that's how I train my athletes. If they're strong, then I want to get them more explosive. If they're explosive, then I want to get them stronger. You know, if they're even, then I use a mixed methods philosophy. And that's these guys, we've been going over that just recently. When we test the vertical, you can do a bounce test and a static test. You know, and that's kind of what I base it off of. How they, you know, if the static, the counter movement jump test is the higher, then they need to be more elastic, and vice versa. And that's kind of what I use to see when I start individualizing. When we get out of this GPP phase, that's what I start looking at.
Sure. And also, I think, you know, in season, you know, you can hit it higher and then work your way down, you know, on that dynamic effort as you know, get closer, you know, to where you want to peak. You know, you're lower on the end, moving that bar faster. But
at the same time, if you're moving it down, it may be the same relative intensity at that time of the season. The further you get into the season, the more your body's taking a toll on it. So even though you're varying the load, it may be the same relative intensity on the body, you know, as you move further in the season.
One of the things we learned when we were at the Cowboys, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mike Boysick at all, but he was great. Did a lot of really neat stuff, but something that he did that I had never seen before. They do a max effort, they do a dynamic effort, but they also work he called it the power bench, and I thought it was really smart because it really you're training along the line of that force velocity continuum, and it was really pretty neat to see. So yeah, you got a max effort. Well, that's going to be slow once you're starting to get up into heavy triples, heavy singles. No matter how fast you want to move it, it's still moving slow. Dynamic effort, obviously, it's going to be fast. Then you got your sprints that kind of go on, your sprints and jumps and throws that kind of go on past there. But what bridges the gap? And they had that in there, and the way that they had set that up, based off their Tendo unit scores, the guys had to push a certain amount for X number of reps, and it was a power bench. It was pretty cool, and I like that a lot. That's something that Dave and I were talking about implementing in season, because in the past I'd always been kind of a max effort, dynamic effort in season. Max effort was going to be early in the week, dynamic effort late in the week as we got closer to game day. But that power deal, I think, would be better in getting us away from lifting heavy and all the orthopedic stresses that creates on top of the orthopedic stresses the game creates.
So would you eliminate max effort and go into power dynamic
In season?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's smart. I mean, that's essentially what I do, without using those terms or the weights. With my girls in season. I mean,
well, and again, it's just that the methodology is what you're looking for. The means doesn't really matter. If you're doing an explosive push-up for X number of reps, or you're doing or a sprint or a med ball throw, it could still be power and dynamic. It's just the means change.
Yeah.
And so I think
that's my first season. That was the biggest thing I learned. And I learned it from Charlie, or watching Charlie. But you know, like the mechanical stress throughout the course of the season is just tremendous. I can't apply that stress in the weight room. I just can't. You know, I have to do. That's when I started going speed and range of motion. Those were the two things I looked for during the season, because even though it's basketball, it's 40 games of us just pounding our knees, pounding our back, and then banging into other people. And so I immediately, after I got here and watched the way Charlie did things, I immediately eliminated, like you were saying, the heavy load mechanical stress in season, and just got rid of it and started working range of motion and speed for pretty much everything.
What type of loads are they using on that power?
they were in like the 70-80% range.
See, that's what I'm talking about. I feel like guys are getting up.
But no bands, no chains, right? Just straight weight? Or
it was straight weight.
Accommodating.
No, it was straight weight.
Yeah.
It was straight weight.
Which,
Because they would use the chains for the dynamic day, and then they would use straight weight for the power day, and it was between 70 and 80%, and they had to turn a certain Tendo unit number. It had to be 0.6 or faster. And if it was below 0.6, they'd take weight off the bar. And they had to the whole idea was to maintain the speed at the given percentage.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
and I thought that made a lot of sense to me, and it did fill in a very unique gap that's hard for us to train off season wise.
I used the same thing with front squats and pitchers in season. When we got the second half of the season, when we got out of our max effort stuff, where I had them at 80 to 90 the first half of the season, but then I dropped them down to 60 to 70. They had to stay within that range, but the Tendo, it was 0.6 to 0.8. You went above 0.8, you need to go heavier. You go below 0.6, you need to go lower.
And that's what he did.
Yeah, and that's what I used. We did 5x2s second half of the season. That's pretty much what we used exclusively for pitchers.
you know, Dave, I just kind of thought, thinking about the Tendo unit, we talked about Zach Whitfield, we got this kid, a true freshman, who weighs 185 pounds, he squats 550. I mean, just, he's a beast, ran 4.2.
Stud.
He's a stud, but, you know, we're watching him squat, his back's locking up, and, you know, I mean, a 77% day for him, still a heavy day for, you know, and so they brought up, and we need to do some things to change it. I said, you know what, you're absolutely right, and maybe instead of doing, you know, a max effort day for him, maybe you start trying to get him to hit higher numbers on the Tendo unit for force production. You say, how much, what's your force output at this given weight on a given day or given percentage on a given day, and that might be something to do with those guys. When we said they've reached our elite level, they're not doing the max effort. Like Marcus Trice would be an elite guy, Zach would be an elite guy, and some of those guys that are up at that elite level, okay, you squat 500, you don't need to squat 505 to prove anything. Now we start saying, okay, now we're starting to look at developing that explosiveness, because like you were saying, they're strong, we know that.
Yeah.
Let's try to make them more explosive. I don't know if there's ever a ceiling on how explosive you can be.
And how much stronger do you need to be? I mean, 500 pounds is at his weight. I mean, and that mechanical stress you're putting on him. I mean, this movement reserve we have, you're eliminating. Even if they're squatting perfectly, the tension on your body, on the soft tissue, you know, you're wearing it down. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, you can only take your spine into flexion so many times. And even though in a squat you're preferably not going into spinal flexion, but still you can only do that so many times. And when you multiply that load times the repetitions, you're eliminating hundreds and hundreds of spinal flexion movements that we have left in us. And you don't want to eliminate them in the weight room. If you're going to use them in life or on the field, you know. And so that we actually just had this conversation.
Is that McGill?
Huh?
Is that McGill?
It comes from McGill, it comes from Boyle, but these guys were reading something and they were asking me about it, and so we started talking about it.
Well, I heard that very same thing. It was the paperclip analogy.